am Jake Eddy. I play the guitar. Let's check the dismount on this. Lint. So what bluegrass kind of means to me, being from Appalachia, being from West Virginia specifically, is just, it's a way that I've been able to connect with my community and with my roots and with my family. And, you know, it's just something that I grew up around, even if it wasn't just playing with my family. Like, I would go to square dances and go to festivals, and I brought my banjo in for show and tell. It feels like home. I mean, that's kind of cliche, but when I think about where we live and how we were raised up, that stuff is like a soundtrack for my whole life. You know, it's in here, you know, and I can't, it's hard to explain. It's very personal, and it's very wrapped up in just like my identity as a guy who lives in the world. You know, it's the way that I see the whole world is through, you know, the lens of traditional music almost. I started picking when I was 8 or 9, and there's not anything else that I thought was cool when I was a kid. You know, most of the people in my family that I looked up to were musicians. So like, I had a grandfather on my mom's side that was a picker. He learned to play guitar and banjo, I think, kind of to honor his grandfather. Like, and so there's some old pictures and stuff of my grandpa like playing guitar when he was a teenager and whatever. And then when I was a kid, he was just all about the bluegrass thing. Yeah, and we got to make music together like all throughout to the end of his life. My first professional gig touring on the road was also his. So we got to go on the road together and do all that whole thing. It was pretty special. I had cousins on my dad's side that played and stuff. So when get together for Thanksgiving or Christmas or a birthday party or something, everybody would play tunes. And so I just wanted to, you know, and it was like kind of my family's recreational activity, I guess. So when I first feel like I found my voice on the instrument, or maybe just in the style of music in general, I guess I was pretty young, and then pretty quickly started getting that like child prodigy like thing thrown around, which I think is probably insane to say. But I don't know if I understood it on any kind of like deep level. Like, I could play proficiently and stuff, and I like to pick, but I think when I started to really feel like connected to the instrument in a real meaningful way was probably when I started playing with Melvin Goins, who was a like kind of a first generation-ish bluegrass guy. He was in the Lonesome Pine Fiddlers, and he was played with Ralph Stanley and stuff. And so I got to go on the road with him when I was 14 years old, and I got to be around like great cross-picking guitar legend. Junior Blankenship was in that band. Got to spend time around like Larry Sparks and guys like that. And so being validated by some of my like hero figures and getting to hear those guys play and identify with their playing, I think that helped quite a bit. You know, I loved picking when I was a kid, but I think when I was kind of in my early teens, I was like, oh yeah, this is the only thing that I'll ever be able to care about, you know. You know that feeling when there's something that you just can't. I couldn't get rid of it. I just had the bug, I guess. I think a lot of people would say that I have a voice, or they can identify things about my playing that are unique to me. I just put a lot of time into practicing, a lot of time into caring about the music, and just let the rest kind of happen. I think if a lot of players set out to sound unique or to kind of like have their own thing that sets them apart, it's like almost always sounds contrived and phony and weird. And so any originality or uniqueness that I have on the instrument is just pure luck, and it comes from just respect for the music and players that came before me. And I went to jazz school for like a year. I flunked out. Not because I couldn't play, but just that my attendance was bad, and I just couldn't dig that scene, you know? But yeah, so there's some jazz influence there, and like, so I've studied like, you know, like chord theory and a lot of that kind of stuff quite a bit. I mean, lately, like a lot of Oscar Peterson. I've been listening to Stuff Smith a lot, a great jazz violinist. And outside that, man, I'm a huge James Taylor fan, and I love like singer-songwriter guys who can play some guitar, like Jim Croce I love. And growing up, I was into like some punk rock music. Like, I really liked the Dead Kennedys and Black Flag, and my dad was into like the Violent Femmes and Led Zeppelin. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of listening that goes on that's maybe not necessarily directly translate to the instrument, but it's in there, you know. I'm a huge Wu-Tang fan. I love MF Doom. Love this band, Lake Street Dive. Jerry Reed. Like, for my early practice routine, especially when I was young, there was not a lot of emphasis in our household on anything. Like my parents weren't, oh, you have to practice. Make sure you get your hour of practice in. It was nothing like that. They didn't care. So there was no forced practice, but most of my practice was just learning stuff by ear. I mean, I didn't have anyone in my life who could really read music. My mom maybe a little, but my grandpa, who I spent the most time with, he couldn't read a lick of music or really tab or any notation. So it was mostly just like here's how I play it. And then I would say, okay, I'll go learn it. And I would go and sit and learn it, record them on a tape recorder and replay it over and over again, or just make them sit there with me for like 10 hours and show me note by note, And so it was all just like learning tunes by ear and learning tunes from records that they liked, important records like Flat and Scruggs and the Stanley Brothers and the Osborne Brothers and stuff like that. And so just sitting down or going to a jam and being like, okay, these are the 10 fiddle tunes that they play at every jam, and learning those. And just building repertoire and vocabulary was like the first 10 or 15 years of my journey on the instrument, Like when I teach students now, that's almost the first thing I tell them is don't worry about a course about how to like strengthen your pinky until you know 200 tunes, Just learn, build repertoire and vocabulary through whatever style you play, and then you can worry about like how to play faster and how to play cleaner and whatever. But to be able to play music is like step one, and then play it well is like the last step. So the metronome thing, my relationship with the metronome, and a lot of folks, they'll come up to me on shows and say, man, we see you practicing with that metronome. Or like, it's a thing that's become a part of my like brand, I guess. And yeah, so I've got pretty obsessive with it. I'm just into timing. Like you play with somebody with great timing, it doesn't matter anything else about their playing. If their feel is good, you can enjoy it, I've been on sessions where they're like, man, it doesn't sound like you're following the click, like something's wrong. And they'll go and solo things out and they're like, oh man, it's everyone else, I know you have to listen to everyone, but it's like, sometimes I get a little too in love with the click. It's not like riding a bike. You can lose it in no time. So if you're not shedding with the metronome, I'll know. Last year has been like kind of career highs for me as far as just like personal goals and things. Like growing up, I always wanted to play the Grand Ole Opry. That was something that stuck out to me for all my life. And I think I just did it like my 5th time or 4th time not too long ago. That feels good to have that kind of going. And I got to do Crossroads. Eric Clapton, Crossroads was really like maybe the coolest gig I ever did. We were getting driven to the show. We were in LA, playing in San Diego the next day. They sent a guy to pick us up. They're driving down the freeway to San Diego. And the guy's like, oh, you're a guitar player? Blah, blah, blah. Like, where do you play? And I said, oh, just, we're on play all over. And we drove by Crypto Arena. And he goes, man, wouldn't you love to play over there someday? And I was like, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. And I was like, I played there last month. I couldn't help it. So that was a huge one. And then I'm doing a lot of session work, doing a lot of teaching as well. So I do this program where students can actually come and live with us and learn guitar in like this full immersion kind of thing. And we study guitar kind of like from sun up to sundown, share meals together, walk the dog together, whatever. So it's like a pretty intense like one-on-one learning experience for the student. Just put out another solo record that I'm pretty proud of. Got nominated for a couple IBMAs. Yeah, it's going well. This guitar is like the holy grail for me and for probably any bluegrass guitar player, really any guitar player at all. It's a 1943 Martin D28, what guys will call a herringbone. So like the original D28s, they have this trim along the outside that's the herringbone pattern. That only exists on like the original run of D28s from like 1934 to 1946, maybe. I've had old guitars off and on throughout the years. Never could get the money together to buy one of these, obviously, because they've gone away from normal people. I got really lucky on this, man. I was spending some time with Brian Sutton and Chris Eldridge at a camp we taught together in North Carolina, and I'd spent some time playing both of their D28s from, I think theirs are 37 and 39 or 36 and 37, and just, man, and they said, man, you got to get one. Long story short, I remembered an old guy that I knew from bluegrass festivals growing up who had this guitar and would let me play it from time to time, just like at his campsite at a festival or whatever. And he would always say, man, if you want to buy it, let me know. I had these two older guitars. I had a 50s Martin and a 40s Gibson, and I sold them both and ended up with a pretty little pile of change. And I called him, and he said he would sell it to me for what he paid in like the early 2000s or maybe late 90s, which is a lot different than what you would pay for one now. So I've had it about a year and some change. I think when they found this guitar, it was full of like green mold in somebody's basement, And it had been done up to look like the Tony Rice guitar, like the Clarence White D28. Depending on when they did it, I wonder if they did it to look like Clarence or Tony, I don't know. But it had the sound hole dug out, enlarged, and it had a big black plastic pickguard. The spruce tops were just all great quality. The scalloped bracing, which is something that they abandoned for like a long time after the pre-war days, and just until recently, it's been a new fad to be like, well, is your D20, is your guitar scalloped braced and all that stuff? That's all like, I mean, that's the original way to do it, but hasn't been common for quite a while. The neck profiles are great. They're just high quality, and they're built by really, really skilled professionals, you know. Instead of a steel T-bar in the neck, this has an ebony rod. So this is like a super light guitar, I think, which adds to kind of... This one's not going anywhere, and I'm lucky to have it. I always tell my wife that someday our grandkids can sell it and buy a spaceship. It's just great. If you have played one, you know. One note on it will make you understand. It's not because they look cool, it's because they're the best. There's a couple things in here. The main thing is, I'll tell you what, let's see if I can get it out. Hold on, this will be worth it. It's a rattler from a rattlesnake. I also have a dollar in here that somebody stuck in there, and I have a braid of my mom's hair in here. Spooky, it's like a, you know. These are my favorite strings, and they have been for a long time, ever before you guys liked me. I liked you first. You know, it's weird. I think sometimes new strings have this kind of like zingy metallic thing, and I don't think these have that. They just sound pretty much great right out of the pack, and they stay in tune really well. These are super stable for me, and just, they sound good for a long time. They're the XS, the coated mediums, 13s. And I used the nickel bronze before, like, religiously on every guitar, but this guitar specifically seems to like the coated ones better. As long as they're staying in tune and they don't look gross, like they can kind of stay. I love them. Don't stop making them. I have to write a strong letter to someone. There's a gig I played once, and I was out of D'Addario strings. On the gig, I broke a string. No big deal. It was like I think I broke my D string first. Then I stepped off stage, and I had one single D string in my pack. It's the only thing I had in my case. I was like, oh my God, so lucky, right? So I put it on, went back out and played another tune, and then I broke my G string, and I had no more strings. And I went back in the green room. It was at a festival, and I saw a guitar case in the corner, not mine. Grabbed it out, and I like tore the lid off and everything, and went through this guy's case, and he had a pack of like EJ17s, and I stole his G string and put it on. It was perfect. But yeah, so I have stolen one G string. If you ever opened up a pack of EJ17s on the festival in Indiana and you were missing a G string, it was me. Leave a comment and I'll make it right.